I don't know how to explain the feeling of watching your child try to piece together a world that doesn't make sense to him. It's like seeing someone build a puzzle with missing pieces. Pieces you can't give him because you're afraid they'll cut too deep. It was a rainy Thursday. I remember because the sound of the drops tapping against the windows was the only thing filling the silence between us. My son Evan had just come back from his mom's house, and he was unusually quiet. He dropped his backpack by the door, gave me a half-hearted hug, and walked straight to the couch. He didn't ask for juice, didn't turn on the TV, didn't ask to play. He just sat there, staring at his shoes. I sat beside him, unsure if I should speak. I've learned to give him space. Not everything needs words. But after a few minutes, he turned to me with eyes too heavy for a child. "Dad?" he said, voice small, fragile. "Why does Mom hate you?" I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared at him, trying to process what I'd just heard. It wasn't the question itself that broke me. It was the way he asked, like he had been carrying it for a long time and didn't want to anymore. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right answer. I wanted to protect her, protect him, protect some ideal of family that was already shattered. But before I could say anything, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a phone, his mom's old phone, one she had given him to play games on. I assumed. "I read some stuff," he said. "I wasn't trying to snoop. I just saw it by accident." He handed it to me, and for a second I hesitated. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see whatever truth was lying in there, waiting to burn, but I did. And what I saw changed something in me, something deep. He had opened a message thread, long, detailed texts. Some were weeks old, some just days. Her words, God, she talked about me like I was a disease, a mistake. She wrote things to friends, to her sister, even to some guy I'd never heard of. Lines that etched themselves into my mind like scars. "He's manipulative," she wrote. "A sad excuse for a father. I can't wait until Evan sees who he really is." There were jokes. Cruel jokes. One where she called me a dead weight in a hoodie. Another where she said if I could erase him from Evan's memory, I would. I could feel my heart beating in my throat, my hands turning cold. My son watched me read. Watched the silent storm in my eyes. And then he did something that absolutely wrecked me. He reached over and touched my hand. "I don't think you're like that, Dad," he whispered. I don't know why she says those things. I couldn't speak. I didn't even know if I could breathe. There was this moment, this unbearable, suspended silence between us, where I felt like the ground beneath my life cracked just a little deeper. My son was too young to fully understand betrayal. But he knew pain. He knew when something didn't fit, and I realized then. I wasn't just trying to protect him anymore. I was trying to survive him being caught in the crossfire. But that night, as I lay awake in bed, her words echoing in my mind, I knew something had to change. I had been too quiet for too long. Too afraid of making things worse, focused on being the bigger person. But when your child begins to question who to trust when he carries your heartbreak in his small hands, silence becomes a betrayal too. I didn't know what my next step would be. Not exactly. But I knew I had to find the truth behind what she was doing and why. Not for revenge, not even for closure, but for Evan, because the next morning, I found something else on that phone, and it made everything worse. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen with the phone still in my hand. I hadn't slept, not really. My mind kept circling those messages like a hawk waiting for its prey to collapse. Evan was asleep upstairs. Peaceful, safe for now. But I felt like I was standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than just a broken co-parenting dynamic. I unlocked the phone again. It wasn't password protected, probably because she didn't expect him to know how to dig through old apps, or archived chats. But he did. Kids today are smarter than we ever give them credit for. I didn't go looking for more messages. I didn't want to become what I hated, someone who spies, someone who snoops. But then I saw the folder. A CloudSynth album labeled screenshots. There were dozens of them. Some from our divorce proceedings. Others from my old texts, cherry-picked lines from conversations where I'd been angry, hurt, scared, no context. Just pieces of me ripped out and pinned to a wall like a criminal case file. But one folder stood out. It was titled For Court. Opened it, and I swear to God, my legs almost gave out. There were emails she'd drafted, but never sent. Statements accusing me of emotional abuse, of neglect, even of trying to turn Evan against her. All complete lies. Each one structured like a narrative, almost like a screenplay, as if she was building a case, not from truth, but from a story she wanted to tell the world. A story where she was the hero, and I was the monster. The worst part wasn't even the accusations. It was the tone. Cold, strategic. She referred to Evan like a tool. If I push him a little harder on the bedtime routine story, he might be able to say his dad scared him. Another note, the therapist says Evan's drawing seemed emotionally flat. I can use that. I felt sick, literally. I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from falling. The walls around me felt like they were closing in, every detail of our past, twisted, manipulated, repackaged into something unrecognizable. This wasn't just bitterness. This was war. A quiet, well-disguised war where the battlefield was my son's heart. And yet, I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I stood there, and I waited for the anger to come, but it didn't sting. Something colder settled in clarity. She wasn't just venting to friends. She was crafting an image, shaping a future where I no longer existed. In Evan's life, and the scariest part, she was doing it slowly, carefully, under the radar. No court motions, no public accusations. Just subtle poison, drip by drip. I needed to protect my son, but I couldn't storm into this like a wounded animal. That would only prove her narrative. I needed to be surgical, strategic, patient, like her, so I started documenting. Quietly, I took photos of the screen with my own phone. I forwarded what I could to an encrypted email. I've made notes of everything Evan told me. Every comment she'd made in front of him that seemed off. Because when someone's rewriting your story, you have two options. You let them do it, or you pick up the pen. But the moment that truly gutted me came a few hours later. Evan came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, dragging his blanket behind him. He looked so small in that moment, a child caught between narratives he couldn't yet understand. He climbed onto my lap, leaned his head on my shoulder, and whispered, "Do you think Mom would be mad if she knew I showed you?" I didn't answer right away. My throat was too tight. I held him close and kissed the top of his head. "No," I said finally, barely more than a breath. "You didn't do anything wrong, buddy. You just wanted to understand. I don't want you and Mom to hate each other. God, what do you say to that? What do you say when your child is the one trying to hold the shattered pieces of two people together?" I hugged him tighter. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, my cousin Rebecca, a lawyer in Boston. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I told her enough. That I needed to understand what my rights were. That I needed help. Quietly, carefully. And she said one thing that stuck with me. If she's playing a long game, you better believe she's counting on you to lose your temper. Don't. I wouldn't. But I also wouldn't stay silent anymore. Because what Evan showed me on that phone, it was just the beginning. It's strange how hindsight sharpens the edges of memories you once smoothed over. Once I started looking back, the signs were there, quiet, deliberate, wrapped in soft tones and carefully chosen words. It wasn't a storm. It was erosion. The first one I remembered was a pickup day, a regular Friday, 2 months before all this. Evan had just turned 7. I brought cupcakes to his school, like we used to do. And when I handed them to his teacher, she hesitated. She said you wouldn't. "Come," she whispered. "That you probably forgot." I laughed it off at the time. Nervous. Confused. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. But now I hear it differently, the planting of an idea, even in others. That I'm unreliable, uninterested, another. Time. Evan got in the car and asked, "Dad, why don't you have a real job?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Mom says you just sit at home on your computer." I felt heat rise in my chest. I run my business from home. I'm there every day. I schedule my life around him. But she'd taken that and twisted it into laziness. A quiet strike against me. No direct attack. Just a seed left in his mind to grow. Then there was the drawing. The therapist had asked both of us to come in for a joint session a while ago. It was part of the custody agreement, a neutral place where Evan could talk freely. He sat at the tiny table, swinging his legs while drawing a picture of our family. He drew her, he drew me. But I wasn't standing with them. I was far away, at the edge of the paper, with a cloud above my head. I thought it was just his imagination, but now I wondered, was he already beginning to think of me that way? Was that her voice I was hearing, echoing in his art? There was something insidious about the way she worked. No yelling, no drama. These calculated reframings of reality. Enough to shift perception without leaving fingerprints. One night, during bedtime, Evan whispered, "Mom says I shouldn't tell you everything we talk about. She says you'll just get mad." I froze. "Do I get mad at you?" He shook his head. "Has Daddy ever scared you?" Another shake, but she said that. He nodded. "Sometimes. Like when I said I wanted to stay longer at your house," she told me not to say that too loud. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to her house, bang on the door, and demand an answer. But I did instead. I tucked him in and sat in the dark beside his bed, staring at the ceiling. My fists clenched. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was isolation. Little by little, she was trying to take away his freedom to feel close to me, to love me openly. And I had let it happen because I didn't want to fight. Because I thought staying calm and compliant made me the better parent. But being silent doesn't protect a child. It just makes room for one voice to fill the silence. I began journaling everything, every odd phrase. He repeated every shift in tone, every vague thing she said at pickups that made my skin crawl. I hope he didn't stay up all night again. He gets that from someone. Maybe one day you'll actually try being a full-time parent. Evan's therapist said he seems overstimulated after your visits. They weren't just words, they were threads. And when I looked closely, I saw a pattern forming. She wasn't angry at me. Not really. She was rewriting the past for herself, for her friends, for Evan, and maybe she actually believed it. Maybe that was the scariest part, that she wasn't lying to hurt me. She was lying to protect. The version of herself she needed to be. But I wasn't going to let Evan carry the weight of our wounds. Not anymore, because a few days later, he came to me again, holding the phone. "Dad, there's another thing I saw," he whispered. "Something she sent to someone named Eric. I think you should see it." He was nervous, scared, like he knew. The truth might hurt more than the questions. I took the phone, my hands trembling. What I read next pulled the ground out from under me. The message was short, just a few lines in a thread buried deep in her texts with a contact named Eric W. No profile picture. No call history, just a string of cold, deliberate conversations, more like briefings than chats. The one Evan. Schultz me read, he still doesn't suspect anything. I've been documenting interactions, like you said. Evan's starting to repeat things without realizing. That's the leverage I needed. I stared at it, rereading it again and again, like maybe I had misunderstood the tone, or the context, or anything. But no, was exactly what it looked like. Leverage, she was using our son, not just emotionally. Tactically, I sat in my office. That night, lights off, blinds drawn, listening to the hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the occasional groan of old floorboards. I couldn't stop shaking, not with rage, but with something colder, betrayal, maybe, or dread, because suddenly everything felt orchestrated, calculated, and I had walked into it blind. Thinking this was just another messy divorce with bruised egos. But this was premeditated. I called Rebecca again and read her the message. She went silent. Then she said, "You need to be very careful now. If she's actively trying to build a case, it's because she wants something long-term. Not just custody, full erasure." My mouth went dry. That night, after Evan had gone to sleep, I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. There was a tired man looking back, a man who hadn't cried in years, a man who used to believe that if he just stayed kind, things would settle down. But sometimes kindness looks like weakness to people like her. And weakness invites conquest. I needed to respond not with violence, not with confrontation, but with clarity. So I made a plan. First, I stopped replying emotionally to her texts. I kept everything clinical, factual, brief. Confirmed. Okay? Noted. No emotion, no bait. Every message became a line I could defend in court if I had to. Second, I bought a small digital voice recorder. I didn't want to record for revenge. I recorded for defense. Drop-offs, pickups, conversations in public. I kept everything. Third, I reached out to Evan's therapist. I didn't accuse. I didn't imply. I just asked if I could sit in on a session, not as a parent, but as a participant. She agreed. That session changed everything. Evan was drawing again, this time a beach scene. He said it was a place he wished we could all go together before things got weird. The therapist asked what he meant. He paused. Then he said, "Mom says Dad doesn't love us anymore, but I think he still does. I think he just talks different." That word different hit me like a punch. The therapist looked at me, gently. "What do you want Evan to know right now?" she asked. I turned to him, and my voice cracked before I even spoke. That I have never stopped loving you. That I never will. That no matter what anyone says, I'm here, always. He looked up at me, eyes glassy, and nodded slowly. That night, I got a text from her. "He told me about your little speech in therapy. Hope you feel better about yourself. Just remember, I know who you are, and so will he." I didn't respond. I just saved it, because now I understood. This wasn't a battle over parenting. This was a campaign, subtle, insidious, built on narrative and fear. But I had something stronger. I had truth, and I had a child who still trusted me. Even if that trust was shaken, and I wasn't going to let her take that away. Not now. Ever. But I still didn't know who Eric really was. Not until I ran a reverse lookup on his number. And what I found made my stomach drop. His name was Eric Walters. At first glance, just a generic listing. A man with a LinkedIn profile that said he worked in family advocacy, which didn't mean much to me. No social media presence, no photos. Just the kind of background that looks almost too clean. But then I saw it. His name had been listed in a blog post on a family law site. Not as a lawyer. Not as a therapist. As an advocate hired by a private firm that worked with high-conflict custody cases, specifically those involving allegations of parental alienation. He was hired, often quietly, by one parent to help document patterns of emotional harm, sometimes in legitimate cases, but more often to create a paper trail that favored one side over the other. Suddenly, her messages made more sense. The documentation, the planting of ideas, the coached phrases Evan had been repeating. It was all part of a bigger scheme, one where she wasn't just trying to win custody. She was trying to erase me completely, using our son as the evidence. I stared at my screen, a dull ringing in my ears. This wasn't just about anger anymore. This was calculated character assassination. And worse, it was working in slow motion right in front of my son's eyes. But now I had a name. And that changed everything. I reached out to Rebecca again and sent her everything. The screenshots, the emails, the voice recordings, the new information on Eric. She called me almost immediately. "This is serious," she said. "We're not just talking about manipulation anymore. This borders on legal misconduct if she's using a third party to influence a minor without disclosure. It could violate court orders." And then she asked something I wasn't prepared for. "Do you want to take this to court now?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't want to destroy Evan's mother. I didn't want him to grow up seeing his parents fight like enemies in front of a judge. But I also couldn't let her continue poisoning him against me, not in whispers, not in therapy, not through people like Eric. I was out of time, so I chose a different path. Not legal action, not yet. But confrontation, soft, indirect. Surgical. I waited until the next scheduled drop-off at a public park, where Evan loved to feed the ducks. She arrived right on time, as always, with that tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. We watched Evan run ahead with his bag of cornmeal, giggling, tossing little handfuls toward the water. I turned to her, calm, my hands in my jacket pockets. I came across some messages. I said. She stiffened, just barely. "What messages?" "Eric Walters," I said quietly. A pause then. "You're invading my privacy now?" "No," I said. "Evan showed me. He thought he was doing something wrong. You made him feel like he was keeping a secret from me." He was scared. She crossed her arms. "He's a child. He doesn't understand the context of no," I interrupted. "He understands exactly enough to know when he's being made to choose." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" I shook my head. "No, I'm reminding you that Evan is watching both of us. Every day, every word, every silence. He's learning what love looks like and what control sounds like." She didn't respond, just stared at me, jaw clenched. Blinking too fast, so I said the only thing that really mattered. "I'm not going to fight you, but I will protect him, even from you, if I have to." And I walked away. I didn't look back. But I heard her call after me. "He'll hate you one day. You'll see." I kept walking because I had already seen enough. But what I didn't expect, what I never could have imagined, was what Evan would draw in his next therapy session. That drawing, it changed everything. 2 weeks passed. She didn't contact me again. No accusations, no veiled threats, no passive-aggressive messages through Evan. It was as if my words at the park had landed somewhere deep, maybe deeper than I had expected. But that silence, it wasn't peace, it was pressure, like the hush before a dam gives way. Then came the therapy session. It was a rainy afternoon, like the day this all began. Evan held my hand a little tighter than usual as we walked into the office. The therapist greeted us with that warm, practiced smile she always wore, the one that made kids feel safe. Even when everything around them was complicated today, she said. Evan wanted to draw again, so he did. He sat at the tiny table with his box of colored pencils and began to sketch. He didn't rush. He was thoughtful, focused, choosing each color like it mattered. I sat nearby, quiet, just watching. When he was done, he turned it around and placed it in front of us. It was a picture of two homes. On the left, his mom's house, tall, gray, with a big window and what looked like a closed curtain. A figure stood behind the window, smaller than the rest, with a sad face drawn in thick black pencil. Above it, a speech bubble. Don't tell him that. On the right was my house, smaller, a little messier. The lawn had toys on it. The sky. Above it was blue. He had drawn himself outside that house, holding a kite. And beside him was me. But here's what stopped everything. He had drawn a bridge connecting the two houses right in the middle of that bridge. I want both. The therapist didn't speak for a long time. She just stared, her expression softening in a way I hadn't seen before. Then Evan turned to me. I don't want to feel bad for loving both of you, he said. I felt my throat tighten. I blinked away the burn behind my eyes and nodded. You never have to feel bad for that, buddy, I whispered. Ever. Later. That evening, after I dropped Evan off at her place, I found a folded note in his backpack. Just a torn piece of lined paper, clearly written in a rush. No greeting, no name. Just, maybe I went too far. I didn't know how to handle everything. I'll stop. I don't want him to hate me either. I sat in my car for a long time after that, just holding the note. There was no apology, no admission. But there was something better. Maybe recognition. She finally saw what I had been seeing, that in the war she had declared, the casualty wasn't me. It was Evan's trust, his joy, his freedom to love. She was breaking her own son without realizing it. And now, maybe she did. Things didn't change overnight. We still live in two houses. We still share time, logistics, silences, but the tension eased. The planting of seeds stopped. The shadow lifted. Evan laughs more now. He talks freely. He doesn't walk on eggshells. And I don't check her messages anymore. I don't need to. Because now I know the only message that matters is the one he drew. And in that message, I still exist, in color, in light, in truth. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.